In 1897, Ransom Olds built one of America's first cars. By 1949, the Rocket V8 made Oldsmobile the most exciting name on the road. Millions trusted it. Dealers couldn't keep the Cutlass in stock. Then year by year, that trust eroded. No scandal, no recall, no single catastrophic failure. Why did Oldsmobile fade away? The answer is a series of quiet decisions that erased everything the brand once stood for. Ransom E. Olds was not just a name on the building. He was the restless mind behind the earliest American mass-produced car. By 1897, his Lansing workshop was turning out vehicles that looked more like horseless carriages than anything on the road today. But the idea was already clear. Cars could be for everyone, not just the wealthy. Olds' early years were a blur of experiments, patents, and the relentless push for reliability. By 1908, Oldsmobile had joined General Motors, becoming a cornerstone of the new automotive giant. For decades, Oldsmobile built a reputation for steady, dependable cars. But after World War II, the brand's engineers saw a different future, one driven by power and speed. The post-war years brought a rare pause in Detroit, as labor strikes and material shortages gave engineers space to rethink the heart of the American car. In 1949, Oldsmobile unveiled something that would change the industry, the Rocket V8. It was the first high-compression overhead valve V8 offered in a mainstream American car, and it instantly set Oldsmobile apart from its rivals. The Rocket's 135 horsepower was staggering for its time. Most competitors were still using flathead engines that struggled to reach 95. The Rocket's aluminum-capped heads and 8.0:1 compression ratio gave it a wide power band and a lighter feel, making the car both faster and easier to handle. Chief Engineer Ernie Miller, working with a tight-knit team that included Jack Giffen and Fritz Miller, pored over every detail, from the cylinder head castings to the high-compression pistons. Their work paid off. Road tests in Motor Trend and Car Life praised the Rocket 88's acceleration, calling it the closest thing to a rocket launch you could buy. Dealers embraced the new identity, showrooms filled with rocket-ready banners. Oldsmobile's advertising department leaned into the jet age, filling magazines and TV screens with rocket motifs and promises of power. NASCAR victories, like Bill Rexford's 1950 championship in a Rocket 88, gave the performance story real credibility. Sales exploded. The 88 line jumped from just under 16,000 units in 1949 to more than 73,000 in 1950. By the late 1950s, Oldsmobile was selling nearly 100,000 rocket-powered cars a year. Customers came for the promise of modern engineering and stayed for the feeling of confidence and excitement that the Rocket 5.8 delivered. The brand had found its spark, a clear technical identity built on innovation, performance, and trust. That identity would be tested in the decades ahead, but for a time, Oldsmobile was the car that made Americans believe in the future. By the early 1960s, Oldsmobile had become a fixture in American driveways. The Cutlass, introduced in 1961, was more than just another model. It was the car that defined what Oldsmobile stood for. Dealers pitched it as the next step up for families who wanted something better than a Chevy but did not want to pay Cadillac prices. The message was simple. Oldsmobile delivered comfort, performance, and a touch of prestige, all wrapped in a shape that felt modern without being flashy. On the showroom floor, that promise was easy to see. Salespeople knew how to walk a customer through the General Motors lineup, starting with Chevrolet, then guiding them to Oldsmobile as the car for those ready to move up. Buick and Cadillac sat further up the ladder, but Oldsmobile was where most Americans landed when they wanted more. The Cutlass, with its smooth ride and balanced handling, was at the heart of this strategy. It offered V8 power for those who wanted it, but also delivered quiet comfort and a sense of reliability that buyers came to trust. Advertising during these years leaned into that trust. Print and television spots showed families loading up for vacations, young couples taking their first road trip, and retirees enjoying the open road. The message was always clear. Oldsmobile was the car you chose when you wanted to show you had made it, but you still cared about value. The brand's reputation for dependability meant that a Cutlass in the driveway was a sign of good judgment, not just good fortune. Behind the scenes, Oldsmobile's place in the General Motors hierarchy was carefully managed. The company's brand ladder made sure each division had its role, and Oldsmobile's was to be the step-up choice, more refined than Chevrolet, but less expensive than Buick. This clarity paid off. By the mid-1960s, Oldsmobile was selling nearly 1 million cars a year, with the Cutlass leading the charge. Dealers thrived on repeat customers, many of whom returned every few years to trade up for the latest model. The sense of loyalty was strong, fueled by a product that delivered on its promises and a brand that seemed to understand what its buyers wanted to. For a generation, Oldsmobile stood at the sweet spot of the American car market. The Cutlass was not just a bestseller, it was the anchor of a brand that felt both solid and aspirational. But this success rested on something fragile, a clear, unique identity. As long as Oldsmobile stayed true to what made it special, the future looked bright. Yet in the years ahead, that clarity would be tested by forces both inside and outside the company. Gasoline rationing and empty highways became a reality for American drivers in the fall of 1973. The OPEC oil embargo sent fuel prices soaring almost overnight, and suddenly the big V8 engines that had defined Oldsmobile's success looked like relics from another era. Inside General Motors, the shock was immediate. Planners and executives searching for a way to control costs and protect market share began to rethink everything from engine size to how entire cars were built. The answer, at least on paper, was platform rationalization. Instead of each General Motors brand building its own unique cars from the ground up, divisions would now share basic structures, engines, and even sheet metal. Committees were formed to oversee this new approach, with meetings focused less on innovation and more on efficiency. Oldsmobile, once the division known for bold engineering, found itself assigned to the same platforms as Chevrolet and Buick. The logic was simple. Shared designs meant lower production costs and easier compliance with new fuel economy rules. But as the differences between Oldsmobile and its siblings faded, so did the clarity that once set the brand apart. What began as a response to an energy crisis quietly set off a slow unraveling of Oldsmobile's identity. By the late 1970s, the Oldsmobile badge had become a puzzle for buyers. In focus groups, most people could not pick an Oldsmobile out of a lineup of General Motors cars. One internal survey from the early 1990s found that 71% of participants could not tell the difference between an Oldsmobile, a Buick, or a Chevrolet unless they saw the logo. The showroom experience only deepened the confusion. Dealers often parked the Cutlass Sierra next to its Chevrolet and Pontiac twins, with little more than a grille or a badge to set them apart. For customers who once associated Oldsmobile with innovation, the sameness felt like a betrayal. Then came the diesel crisis. In a rush to meet new fuel economy standards, Oldsmobile's 5.7-liter V8 diesel engine hit the market with little real-world testing. Owners soon faced cracked cylinder heads, blown head gaskets, and engines that failed at half the expected mileage. Warranty claims soared, costing General Motors hundreds of millions of dollars. Some dealers saw entire rows of unsold diesels and angry customers demanding buybacks. For many loyal owners, the promise of Oldsmobile reliability was gone. The damage was not just technical, it was personal. Trust, once earned over generations, began to slip away. Because once that identity is gone, even the strongest brands can quietly disappear. By the 1990s, Oldsmobile was caught in a tightening vice. Japanese automakers had rewritten the rules for American buyers, delivering cars that felt modern, reliable, and efficient. Toyota and Honda, once considered outsiders, now claimed a growing share of the market Oldsmobile once called its own. Inside General Motors, strategy meetings grew tense as executives studied sales charts that kept sliding downward. Market share for Oldsmobile fell from over 5% in 1985 to barely 2% by the end of the decade. Attempts to reposition the brand included new logos, sleeker models, and vague promises of modern luxury. But they failed to draw buyers back to the showroom. The boardroom conversations turned blunt. Internal memos circulated in early 2000 showed Oldsmobile had posted 3 straight years of operating losses, with annual sales dropping below 150,000 units. General Motors leadership, facing pressure to streamline and focus on profitable divisions, weighed the numbers against the emotional pull of history. On December 2, 2004, the decision was made public. Oldsmobile would be shut down. The final car rolled off the line at the Orion assembly plant, ending more than a century of American automotive history. Because once that identity is gone, even the strongest brands can quietly disappear. In today's market, even iconic names face erasure when their identity fades. As legacy automakers reinvent themselves, the lesson remains clear. Heritage alone can't survive confusion and complacency. Because once that identity is gone, even the strongest brands can quietly disappear.